You use my trust fund for this? That was the first thought that cut through the noise, sharp and cold, as the crystal glasses clinked and someone laughed near the piano. My smile didn't move. My hands stayed folded in my lap. Only my heart knew the truth before my mind caught up. This wasn't my celebration. When the people you love steal what you worked your whole life for, silence becomes your only weapon. Stay with me till the end. You'll understand why I never raised my voice. The room smelled like vanilla cake and roses, a sweet mix that used to remind me of my mother's birthdays. I was sitting in the same dining hall where I had once practiced speeches with my father, my mentor, my biggest supporter, or so I thought. The evening shimmered with gold streamers and fairy lights draped across the ceiling. It was supposed to be my night. I'd just placed in the top 3% of the bar exam, and my father had insisted on throwing a small dinner with family. Small. That word felt like a joke the second I saw the number of cars parked outside. I'd walked in wearing the same navy dress I'd worn for my mock trial final, professional but understated. My father had always said, "Let your work speak for you." I'd believed him. But when I entered the hall, every pair of eyes turned toward me, not with pride, not with applause, but with polite confusion. And then I saw her. My sister Lily. In white. Not soft cream or ivory, bridal white, the kind that announces something new, something permanent. Her hair was pinned up with pearls, her nails perfectly done, and she was glowing in a way that had nothing to do with me. She looked radiant. Too radiant. My father was at the center, holding a glass of champagne, his smile wide and rehearsed. I thought maybe he'd start by congratulating me, mention the exam results, maybe say how proud he was that his eldest daughter had followed in his footsteps. Instead, he turned toward Lily and said, "Tonight we celebrate love, commitment, and family." Family. The word hit differently this time. Everyone clapped. My aunt wiped her tears. And I stood there, frozen, still clutching the envelope I'd brought, the one containing my bar exam score letter. It suddenly felt like a useless prop in a play I didn't audition for. The moment blurred. Laughter, hugs, flashes of cameras, Lily holding up her ring as people gasped. The diamond sparkled like it knew something I didn't. I tried to breathe, to make sense of it, but my stomach churned as if it already knew what my mind refused to see. "Surprised," she whispered when she finally reached me, her smile perfectly shaped, voice dripping in honey and victory. "Completely," I said. My tone was calm, controlled. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I was raised never to bleed in public. She leaned in closer. "I wanted to tell you, but Dad said it'd ruin the surprise." I smiled back, matching her tone. "Oh, it's ruined all right." Her laughter was light, unbothered. She moved on, greeting other guests, leaving me standing under the chandelier, staring at the reflection of two sisters, one glowing, one invisible. Dinner followed soon after. I sat near the end of the table between my cousin's bored teenage daughter and an empty chair that was supposed to be mine, I think. My father gave a toast about new chapters and sacrifices made for family. He mentioned the word fund once in passing, and we couldn't have done this without the family fund that made tonight possible. That single word made my hands go numb. Family fund. He said it so casually, as if it were a joint pot of money we'd all agreed to share. But I knew better. My trust wasn't a family fund. It was mine. A gift from my late grandfather meant for my education, my future law practice. The fund I'd never touched because I wanted to build everything the right way. And now it had paid for roses, crystal, and champagne flutes engraved with Lily's initials. I stared at the tablecloth, white lace like her dress. Every detail matched her taste, not mine. I started noticing small clues I'd missed before. The planner's clipboard with her name on it, the receipts sticking out from my father's jacket pocket, the way the pianist played canon in D instead of something celebratory. None of it was for me. "Sweetheart," my father said, looking toward me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Say a few words." I stood, my chair creaking behind me. My throat felt dry, but my voice didn't shake. "Congratulations," I said softly, raising my glass toward my sister. "May you always get what you truly deserve." It was subtle, but she heard it. Her smile faltered for half a second before she hid it behind her glass. My father laughed, thinking I'd made a charming toast. I sat back down, steady, silent. As dinner continued, I noticed things I hadn't before. How my father avoided eye contact, how my aunt whispered something that made her husband shift uncomfortably, How the planner handed my father an envelope he quickly slipped into his pocket. I watched every detail like I was cross-examining the room. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was a witness. When dessert came out, Lily's fiancé, Jason, stood up to thank the Mitchell family for their generosity. He mentioned how every detail was handled perfectly thanks to the trust funds. Plural. Funds. That word echoed in my head like a closing argument. I excused myself from the table. Nobody stopped me, why would they? I was invisible again, the background character in their perfect photo. In the hallway, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. The house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears after hours of noise. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding, trying to process everything. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was calculating. Near the entrance, I saw the event planner's clipboard sitting unattended on a table. Pages of receipts, invoices, and delivery slips poked out of it. My eyes landed on a familiar number. The trust account code my grandfather used to write on every check he gave me. I took out my phone, pretending to check a message, and quietly began snapping photos. The receipts, the catering invoice, the transfer slips. I zoomed in on dates, on signatures. Each one carried my family's fingerprints. The air smelled faintly of champagne and roses, but all I could feel was something else. That slow, creeping realization that I'd been robbed by the people who raised me. As I turned back toward the dining hall, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Calm face, perfect hair, steady eyes. I almost didn't recognize myself. There was no anger, no tears, just a quiet focus. My sister had her ring, my father had his reputation, but I had something far more dangerous. Proof. I returned to the table just as my sister began thanking everyone for coming. She looked radiant under the lights, her laughter echoing through the hall. My father stood beside her, proud and oblivious. Me. I smiled for every camera flash, memorizing the moment. Because someday soon, when the same cameras turned toward her again, it wouldn't be for joy. After the guests left, my father walked me to the door. He placed a hand on my shoulder, that same fatherly gesture he'd used my whole life when he wanted me quiet. "You're happy for her, aren't you?" he asked, his voice careful. "Of course," I said, steady and soft. "She deserves everything she has coming." He smiled, relieved, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Outside, the night air was cold. I walked to my car under strings of fading lights, the music still faint behind me. The white gown, the speeches, the toasts, all burned into my memory like evidence photos. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in the car, watching the lights flicker through the windshield, and whispered to myself, "Congratulations, Lily. Enjoy it while it lasts." I opened my phone, created a new folder, and titled it Evidence, Engagement Night. I uploaded the pictures one by one, each click steady and satisfying. Then I turned off the phone, took a deep breath, and smiled. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being celebrated, and that was perfectly fine. Because I knew something they didn't. They thought they'd stolen from a daughter, from a sister. But they had just challenged a woman who knew how to build a case and destroy one. And this time the law would be on my side. They thought I drove home that night and cried. But I didn't. I didn't even flinch when I reached my apartment door. I unlocked it the same way I always did. Right key, left turn, quiet push, as if nothing inside me had shifted. But something had. I hung my coat neatly on the rack, placed my phone on the counter, and turned on the lamp beside the couch. Warm yellow light filled the room, soft, steady, familiar. My late grandfather's picture sat on the shelf beside the law books he once gave me. His handwriting was still on the inside cover of Civil Procedure. Never fight angry. Win quietly. That sentence had carried me through law school. Tonight it carried me again, but in a way he probably never intended. I made tea the way I always did. 1 spoon of honey, no sugar, and sat at my desk. My laptop hummed softly as I opened a blank document. The folder from my phone, Evidence, Engagement Night, stared back from the corner of the screen. I opened it. One by one the photos loaded, invoices, transfers, receipts. My sister's name printed neatly beside every purchase. The date of transfer stood out. 3 weeks before my father's small dinner. The same week he told me not to worry about checking my trust statements. "Too many boring numbers," he'd said. I smiled at the memory, but it wasn't a warm smile. They thought they knew me. The quiet daughter. The one who avoided arguments. The one who said, "It's okay," even when it wasn't. They never saw the side of me that studied every clause, every loophole, every signature line. The one that noticed patterns. By midnight, my apartment smelled faintly of lavender and paper ink. My tea had gone cold. My fingers kept typing. Notes, timelines, connections. I wasn't sure if I was building a case or just building courage, but I knew one thing. I wasn't powerless. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds. I barely slept, but I didn't feel tired. There's a strange kind of energy that comes after betrayal. It doesn't burn. It freezes. I dressed plainly, beige sweater, dark slacks. Nothing that screamed confrontation. My reflection in the mirror looked calm. My eyes, though, had changed. They weren't soft anymore. They were observant, calculating. At 9 sharp, I drove to my father's office. It was the same place where I'd once interned during college. The smell of old wood and polished brass still lingered in the hallway. His secretary, Margaret, smiled politely when she saw me. "Morning, dear," she said. "Your father's expecting you?" I shook my head. "No, this is just a visit." I walked straight into his office before she could object. My father looked up from his desk, startled but masking it well. "You're up early," he said, voice even. "I wanted to thank you," I replied. He frowned slightly. "For what?" "For the dinner. For everything." His shoulders relaxed. "You deserve to celebrate, sweetheart." "I do," I said, holding his gaze. "That's why I'm here." He smiled, still unsure where the conversation was going. I let the silence linger just long enough for it to become uncomfortable. Then I glanced around the office. The photos, the polished awards, the neatly arranged folders. He'd built a career on precision. So had I. "Dad," I said finally, "do you remember what you told me when I got into law school?" He chuckled. "Probably something about hard work. You said, always trust the paper trail." He looked at me, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I've been doing that," I continued softly. "Following the trail." He leaned back, folding his arms. "If this is about the trust fund we discussed." "No," I interrupted gently, "we didn't. You spoke. I listened. There's a difference." His jaw tightened. "It's a family matter. Your sister needed help." "With my money," I said. "Without my consent." He exhaled through his nose, the way he did when trying not to raise his voice. "We're family. You'll get it back. Don't make this a legal issue." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I won't. Not yet." That yet made him look up. I stood, smoothing my sweater, pretending to notice a framed photo on his desk. Lily and him at some charity gala, smiling. "You look happy there," I said. He didn't answer. As I left the office, Margaret glanced up, curious. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," I said. "Just tying up a few loose ends." Outside, the autumn air was crisp. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching leaves swirl in the parking lot. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, the kind of calm that comes when you know exactly what you're about to do. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. The clerk recognized me immediately. "Miss Mitchell," she said. "It's been a while." "Yes," I replied. "I just need to check on my trust account." She frowned slightly, tapping her keyboard. It looks like a temporary transfer was made, under joint authorization. Your father's name appears here as trustee." "Joint," I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, it says beneficiary approval confirmed." I leaned closer. "How was that confirmation given?" She hesitated. "A signed authorization form." "Can I see it?" She printed it and handed it over. I stared at the signature beside my name, curved, delicate, identical to mine. But not mine. I'd never signed that document. I traced the pen strokes with my thumb. My father hadn't just betrayed me, he'd forged me. The clerk shifted nervously. "Is everything okay?" I smiled. "It's perfect. Thank you." I left with the copy tucked inside my bag, my pulse steady. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I just drove to the small cafe near the courthouse, the same one I used to study in during law school. The waitress recognized me and brought coffee without asking. "You still take it black?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "the darker the better." As I sat there, I opened my laptop again and pulled up the scanned receipts from the night before. I placed the forged authorization form beside them. Dates matched. Amounts matched. Everything lined up too perfectly. That was their mistake. They didn't think I'd ever check. They underestimated the quiet one. By evening I had a plan. Not a full one yet, just the bones of it. A timeline, a few highlighted sections of law about fiduciary breaches, and a short note that simply read, "Do not warn them. Let them brag first." That night I went for a walk around the neighborhood. The sky was turning pink at the edges, and the smell of cut grass lingered in the air. Kids were riding bikes. A woman watered her plants. Ordinary peace. It felt almost strange to carry something so heavy inside while the world looked so normal. When I got home I saw a message on my phone from Lily. "Lily, hey. Dad told me you were upset. Please don't be. You'll understand one day. Love you." I stared at it for a while, then typed back, "Of course. Love you too." But what I meant was, "You'll understand one day. Too late." Over the next few days I played my role perfectly. I congratulated her on social media, liked her engagement photos, commented with heart emojis. I even dropped by the house once bringing flowers. My mother hugged me, relieved that everything was fine again. My father stayed quiet the entire time. He knew I'd seen the papers. He just didn't know what I'd do with them. And that was the power he could never take back. Each night I added more to my file. Bank records, emails, screenshots of text messages where my father mentioned shifting funds. I even found a draft of an email Lily wrote to a friend. "Dad says it's fine. It's her money, but we're family." That sentence was all I needed. Still, I wasn't ready to move yet. Revenge, I'd learned, isn't about speed. It's about timing. And I wanted them comfortable, happy when the ground finally gave way. A week later I got an invitation to a family brunch. Lily's idea, to heal old feelings. I went. I smiled. I passed the butter and laughed when my aunt told a joke I'd heard 100 times. Midway through, Lily pulled me aside, her voice soft. "You're not mad, right? I mean, it's just money. We're family." I looked at her, really looked. Her skin flawless, her ring gleaming, her eyes naive enough to think she'd gotten away with it. "No," I said slowly. "I'm not mad." She exhaled, relieved. "Good. I'd hate for this to come between us." I tilted my head slightly. "It won't. Nothing's between us now except paperwork." She laughed, not realizing what I meant. I joined her laughter too. But inside something shifted again. That was the moment I stopped being her sister. I became her consequence. That night back home I looked through the growing folder on my laptop. Every file, every timestamp, every document, neatly organized, labeled, cross-checked. My grandfather's handwriting on the spine of my old textbook caught my eye again. "Win quietly." I touched it gently and whispered, "I will." Because what they didn't know about me wasn't that I was smart. They already knew that. What they didn't know was that I was done forgiving. And forgiveness had always been my family's favorite weapon. I closed the laptop slowly after whispering those words. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock beside my grandfather's portrait. Forgiveness had been my family's favorite word, one they used like a bandage for every wound they caused. But tonight I knew I'd never use it again. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The sky outside was a pale gray, the kind that looks almost colorless before the sun decides what kind of day it wants to be. I brewed coffee and opened my curtains, watching the city stretch awake. Cars moved like slow ants below, headlights blinking through fog. My mind wasn't foggy though, it was crystal clear. They had stolen my trust money. They had forged my signature. But worst of all, they thought I'd never notice. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop again. My folder, Justice_working copy, waited like an unfinished story. I started building it the way I'd been trained to build cases. Step by step, document by document. I attached every receipt, every email, every screenshot. I even added photos from that night. My sister's smile frozen mid-laughter, my father's glass raised high. The irony of those images sitting in a folder labeled Justice wasn't lost on me. So I needed more. Evidence without context was just suspicion. I needed connections, a clear chain from the trust account to their hands. And if there's one thing law had taught me, it's that people leave trails even when they think they're being clever. So I started following the trail. I began with the email records. My father had once shared the password to our family email for important documents. I hadn't used it in months, but I remembered it. I logged in expecting it to be empty, but there they were. Hundreds of unread messages. Catering invoices. Payment reminders. Even a florist's thank you note. I clicked through them one by one. The sender lines blurred together. Deluxe banquets, silver linings events, crystal affairs. All thanking Mr. Mitchell for using the L. Mitchell Trust account as payment. My hands went still on the keyboard. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. I printed everything. The sound of the printer echoed in my quiet apartment, each sheet of paper sliding out like a confession. The smell of ink filled the air. When I held the stack, it felt heavier than it should have. But I didn't stop there. At noon, I drove to the bank again. Different branch this time. I'd learned over the years that sometimes, the same institution tells a different story depending on who you ask. I met with a younger teller, polite but inexperienced. "I'm reviewing transactions from a family account," I said. "Can I confirm the authorization method used for electronic transfers?" She hesitated. "Usually it's a verification call or an emailed code." I smiled politely. "So, not a handwritten signature?" She shook her head. "No, ma'am. Only if it's an older setup." That was it, the missing link. My account had been updated years ago for electronic confirmation. There shouldn't have been a physical signature at all. I asked for a verification log. She couldn't give it directly but hinted I could request it through a legal inquiry. A court request or trustee review maybe. Perfect. As I left, my phone buzzed. A message from Lily again. "Lily, hey, just checking in. You disappeared last night. Everything okay?" "Be better than okay." I didn't add more. Let her guess. The not knowing would bother her more than the truth ever could. That evening I stopped by my old law professor's office, Professor Grant. He'd retired but he still consulted occasionally. His office smelled of old books and coffee just like I remembered. "Margaret Mitchell," he said, smiling warmly. "I read your name on the bar pass list. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, sitting down. "I actually need some advice, hypothetically." He raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically?" "Yes. Suppose a trustee forged a beneficiary's signature for personal family use. How would one go about addressing it quietly?" He leaned back, his smile fading. "Hypothetically, I'd gather documentation, establish a timeline, and present it first to the financial institution. Let them confirm the breach before going public. And if it's family, then..." He sighed. "Then you need to decide whether you want justice or peace. You rarely get both." I nodded, hearing the weight in his voice. He'd seen too many families burn over greed. "I understand," I said softly. "Maybe I'll start with justice." As I stood to leave, he added, "And Margaret, make sure your evidence speaks louder than your anger." That night I reviewed everything again. Evidence, timeline, legal options. My living room floor was covered in papers, my grandfather's old fountain pen resting between them like a relic from a better time. I didn't feel angry anymore, I felt focused. Still, part of me wondered why my father had done it. He wasn't a desperate man. He had money, respect, comfort. Maybe it wasn't about need, maybe it was about control. Taking what was mine simply because he could. That thought stung more than the theft itself. Around midnight I heard a soft knock on my door. I hesitated, heart quickening. Few people visited me unannounced. When I opened the door, Lily stood there, hair undone, eyes red. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside. She looked around the apartment. Her gaze landed on the piles of papers. "You're working on something?" "Always," I said. She sat down slowly, twisting the ring on her finger. "Dad told me you're upset." I told him it's just a misunderstanding. "Is it?" "Yes," she said quickly. "He said the money was temporary. He's going to replace it." "Replace it with what?" I asked softly. "Another lie?" Her face tightened. "Don't be cruel." I studied her, the tremble in her hands, the guilt hiding behind her defensiveness. "I'm not being cruel," I said. "I'm being precise." She looked away. "You've always been dramatic. It's not like you were using it." There was the entitlement, the sentence that revealed everything. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "That fund was my future, Lily. It wasn't a savings account, it was a promise." She crossed her arms, defensive. "You always think you're better than us. Maybe this is karma." "Karma," I repeated. You think stealing from me is divine balance? Her voice cracked. You're making it sound ugly. It is ugly, I said quietly. You just dressed it in flowers and champagne. Silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile. Then she stood abruptly. You know what, forget it. I came here to make peace. Forgiveness? I asked. She froze, sensing the edge in my tone. Yes. I smiled faintly. I retired that word last night. Her eyes filled with confusion and a trace of fear. You're not going to do anything, are you? I didn't answer directly. You should get home, Lily. It's late. As she walked to the door, she paused. You've changed. I finally learned who I am, I said. After she left, I stood in the silence, her perfume still lingering faintly in the air, sweet like lilies. I looked down at the papers spread before me. Every lie had a scent, a color, a texture. Hers smelled like roses and expensive champagne. My father's smelled like polished wood and power. Mine smelled like ink. The next morning I filed an official inquiry with the bank. A trustee review. Quiet. Procedural. Legal. No family names mentioned. Yet. By afternoon the bank manager called to confirm the receipt. We'll investigate, he said. Confidentially. Please do, I replied, my voice steady. Some things are better uncovered slowly. That night I finally slept. Deeply. For the first time in weeks I didn't dream of betrayal. I dreamed of balance. Because now I knew something they didn't. Every lie leaves a paper trail. And I had just found the first page. By dawn I was holding the second. The bank's reply came faster than expected. A short, formal letter confirming that a trustee-initiated transfer had been executed without digital consent. I read that single line over and over until the words felt carved into my chest. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was proof. I made myself breakfast. Dry toast, half a boiled egg. The kind of meal you eat not because you're hungry but because routine keeps your hands from shaking. The kettle hissed softly in the kitchen. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, steady, rhythmic. I remember thinking how fitting that sound was. The world finally catching up with the storm inside me. By 9, I'd printed everything and placed it neatly into 3 envelopes. One for the bank's legal department. One for the State Financial Oversight Board. And one, the thickest, for a private delivery. That one was addressed to Jason Bennett, Lily's fiancé. He deserved to know the kind of family he was marrying into. I didn't add a note, just copies of transactions, the forged signature and the bank's letter. Let the documents speak for me. When the courier left, I sat down and exhaled slowly. My apartment felt colder than usual but not unpleasantly so. It was clarity, crisp, sharp like winter air that burns your lungs but wakes you up. By afternoon my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Miss Mitchell? A woman's voice, calm and professional. This is Natalie Price from First State Bank. We've received your inquiry and are launching an internal audit. I'll keep you updated. Thank you, I said. Her voice lowered slightly. Between us, your documentation was meticulous. Whoever handled those transfers, they left fingerprints all over. I smiled faintly. They always do. When we hung up, I felt a quiet satisfaction bloom under my ribs. Not joy, just the solid weight of control shifting back into my hands. That evening I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't planned to, but something inside me needed to see them, to observe how they looked in the hours before their walls began to crack. The driveway glistened with rain. I could see light through the curtains, the familiar golden glow of our living room lamp. Inside I heard laughter. My mother's voice, soft and warm. For a moment nostalgia almost softened me. Almost. I rang the bell. My father opened the door, surprise flickering briefly before he masked it. Margaret. This is unexpected. I know, I said. But I thought we should talk. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. Lily was there too, curled up on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, her expression shifted from mild guilt to forced cheerfulness. Hey, look who's here. My mother smiled nervously. Tea? I just made some. Sure, I said. I sat across from them, my posture calm. My father cleared his throat. I assume this is about the trust again. It's not about the trust, I said, my tone quiet but firm. It's about honesty. He frowned. Meaning? I reached into my bag and placed a copy of the bank's letter on the table. They confirmed the transfer lacked digital authorization. The color drained from his face. My mother's hand froze mid-pour. "Margaret," he started. "I'm not angry," I interrupted. "I'm just documenting." Lily shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, maybe." "Stay out of it," he snapped, then turned to me. "You don't understand how complicated these things get. I meant to replace the funds before." "Before the engagement?" I asked softly. "Before the investigation begins?" His eyes widened. "What investigation?" "The one the bank initiated this morning." The silence that followed was almost sacred. I could hear the faint tick of the wall clock, the whisper of rain against the windows. My mother finally spoke, voice trembling. "You reported your own father?" "No," I said. "I reported the trustee. The law doesn't recognize blood, only accountability." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You think this makes you righteous? You'll ruin our name." "Our name ruined itself," I said. "I'm just cleaning the record." He slammed his fist on the table, the teacup rattling. "You ungrateful." "Careful," I said quietly enough to make him pause. "You might want to save that tone for the auditors." Lily stood abruptly, her voice breaking. "Stop it. Both of you." I looked at her, mascara smudged, rings still glittering, innocence long gone. "You should have stopped it before it started," I said. "But you didn't." I gathered my things and stood. "I came here to give you a chance to tell the truth. You didn't take it." When I walked out, none of them followed. The next few days passed in a strange calm. The kind of quiet that comes before something shatters. I went to work, answered emails, graded a few mock case studies for students at the community center. On the surface, everything was normal. Underneath, things were shifting fast. 2 days later, Jason Bennett called. His voice was cold, formal. "Margaret, I received something from you." "Yes," I said. "Are these documents real?" "Every page." Silence. Then, "Thank you for letting me know." He hung up. That night I saw it unfold online. Lily's engagement photos disappeared first. Then her relationship status. By morning, her social media pages were locked. The ice had cracked. But I wasn't finished. At noon my father called. His voice trembled with restrained anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have a full idea," I said calmly. "You humiliated your sister. Her fiancé's family is threatening to withdraw their business partnership." "I warned you about consequences," I said. "You chose denial." He exhaled sharply. "You always had to win, didn't you?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said. "I just stopped letting you lose me." He didn't reply. The call ended with a hollow click. That evening, I visited my grandfather's grave. The air was crisp, leaves rustled underfoot. I traced the engraved words with my fingertips. "Integrity is the inheritance that never loses value." "I did what you taught me," I whispered. I followed the paper. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, but the stillness that comes when truth starts to surface. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. A text. "Natalie Price. Audit complete. Trustee found in breach. Temporary hold placed on all related accounts. You'll receive formal notice tomorrow." I stood there for a long moment, phone in hand, the cemetery silent around me. The world felt balanced again, fragile but fair. On the drive home, headlights blurred through drizzle. I thought of Lily, probably crying somewhere, blaming everyone but herself. I thought of my father pacing, realizing the empire he'd built on authority could crumble from one signature he didn't own. Still, a small ache tugged at me. Revenge brings justice, yes, but it also leaves absence. Families don't break cleanly, they splinter. When I reached my apartment, the answering machine light blinked. A message from my mother. Her voice was soft, weary. "Margaret, please talk to us. Your father's not well. This has gone too far." I listened twice, then deleted it. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Some bridges collapse because they were never built right. The next morning, I received the official audit report. Words like forgery, unauthorized transfer, trustee negligence stared back at me in black ink. Attached was a reinstatement confirmation. My account fully restored, funds secured. I held the paper and let the weight of it settle in my hands. Proof again. Only this time it wasn't for them. It was for me. Still, something felt unfinished. Retrieving money was justice on paper. But reputation, that was their true currency. Late that night I opened a blank email. Subject line, transparency. Recipients, the same community board my father chaired and a few longtime donors who'd trusted him with public funds. I didn't write accusations, just attached documents and the bank statement. Facts don't need adjectives. Before hitting send I paused. My finger hovered above the key. Was I crossing a line? Maybe. But I reminded myself they had drawn it first. I just learned to walk it better. I pressed send. The next morning my phone erupted. Messages, calls, notifications. My father's resignation letter hit the local news within hours. Health reasons, it claimed. The comments told a different story. Through it all I stayed silent. No interviews. No explanations. Just quiet. Because when ice breaks, it doesn't scream. It cracks softly and everything sinks on its own. That evening I sat by my window again, watching the rain trace thin rivers down the glass. I thought of my grandfather's advice when quietly I had. But part of me knew the storm wasn't fully over. Not yet. The truth was out, the balance restored, but something inside me still ached. Not for them but for what I used to believe family meant. Still, the ice had broken. And once it breaks, there's no freezing it back together. Tomorrow would bring the final reckoning and I was ready to face it. Tomorrow came quietly just like I expected. No thunder, no warning. Just morning light slipping through the curtains, soft and indifferent as if nothing monumental had happened. But inside me, everything had shifted. The world outside looked ordinary. Birds on the wire, the mail truck crawling down the street. Yet the silence held a strange kind of power. The kind that follows after something irreversible. I sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee that had gone lukewarm, reading the headlines on my phone without really seeing them. I didn't need to. I already knew what they said. Local trustee resigns amid financial controversy. The words looked harmless, printed in neat font. But behind them was my father's downfall, and my sister's public humiliation. The article didn't name me, but everyone who mattered would know. Small towns have long memories and faster mouths. I didn't need to speak a word. The silence did the talking for me. The phone rang twice before I answered. My mother's voice trembled on the other end. "He's in the hospital," she whispered. Stress. His blood pressure spiked. For a moment I said nothing. I just stared at the wall clock ticking steadily above the stove. "I'm on my way," I said finally. When I arrived, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and cold metal. The kind of smell that strips emotion from the air. My father lay in a bed near the window, eyes half open, face pale but still proud. Lily sat beside him, makeup smeared, her phone clutched in both hands like a lifeline. My mother looked up when she saw me. "He needs rest," she murmured. "I won't stay long," I said. For a moment nobody spoke. The heart monitor beeped in a steady rhythm. My father's eyes met mine, still sharp even through exhaustion. "You got what you wanted," he said, voice hoarse. I stepped closer. "No, Dad. I got what I earned. You took what wasn't yours. The world just balanced itself." He turned his head toward the window. "You humiliated me." "No," I said quietly. "You did that when you forged my name." Lily shifted in her chair, her voice small. "She's right, Dad." He glanced at her, disbelief flickering. She was crying, but for the first time her tears weren't manipulation. They were realization. My mother placed a hand on my father's arm. "It's over now," she said softly. "Let's stop this before it destroys us." I looked at her, the woman who'd always told me to keep peace, to avoid conflict, to be the bigger person. "It already destroyed us," I said. "You just didn't notice while it was happening." My father's lips pressed into a thin line. "You'll regret this someday." I took a deep breath. I already did. For 35 years. Not anymore. He closed his eyes, ending the conversation. The monitor kept beeping, steady, mechanical, unforgiving. I turned to leave, but Lily called after me. "Wait." I stopped at the doorway. He stood wiping her cheeks. "Jason left," she said, voice cracking. "He said he couldn't trust someone who hides lies behind smiles." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, but not for what she thought. She stared at me, confusion clouding her face. You planned all this. I met her eyes. No, Lily. You planned it the night you spent my future on your happiness. I just followed the trail you left behind. Her shoulders sagged. She didn't have a response. As I walked out, the automatic doors opened with a hiss. The air outside was cold and sharp, biting my skin. I welcomed it. It felt real, cleaner than the artificial warmth I'd left behind. For weeks, I heard whispers wherever I went. In the grocery store, at the library, even during Sunday walks. Did you hear about the Mitchells? The lawyer daughter exposed them. No one asked me directly, but their eyes did. I gave them the same answer every time: silence. Lily moved back home. The engagement ring vanished from her finger. My father's name disappeared from plaques, committees, invitations. My mother still called once a week, her voice fragile but steady. You could visit, she'd say. I'd answer, not yet. What I didn't tell her was that I wasn't avoiding them out of hatred. It was protection for both of us. Sometimes peace means distance. My days became quieter, simpler. I started teaching part-time at a community legal clinic. Older women came to me with stories. Some about fraud, some about betrayal, all about trust broken by family. They'd sit across from me, hands trembling, voices low. I'd listen, then show them how to find their own trails. Each time I said the words, "You have rights," I felt my grandfather's wisdom echo in the room. Win quietly. But life has its strange way of circling back. One Thursday afternoon, as I was leaving the clinic, a familiar figure waited near the parking lot. Lily. No makeup, no jewelry, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked older, not in years but in truth. Can we talk? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. We walked to a nearby cafe, the same one where I'd once pieced together her betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We sat by the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I lost everything, she said finally. I know, I replied. I blamed you, she continued. But it was easier than blaming myself. I looked at her, seeing the first flicker of humility I'd ever witnessed in her face. Blame doesn't fix anything, Lily. She nodded, eyes glistening. I wanted to say sorry. The words hung between us, fragile but real. I didn't rush to accept them. I just let them settle. After a long pause, I said, I believe you mean it. But forgiveness isn't a switch. It's distance. Time. She smiled faintly, wiping a tear. I get that now. We sat quietly, sipping coffee. For the first time, the silence between us didn't feel sharp. It felt healing, like cool air after a long fever. Before leaving, she reached into her bag and slid a small envelope toward me. Dad asked me to give you this. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a check, the same amount as my trust fund, and a short note in my father's handwriting. For what's owed. And for what's lost. I folded it back neatly. Tell him I don't need it, I said. Her brows furrowed. You're really turning it down? Yes, I said. Money was never the debt. She nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. Not a polite, distant hug, but one that trembled slightly, as if she was holding on to something fragile. I didn't pull away. When she walked out, I stayed behind, watching the rain streak across the window. Somewhere deep inside, the last bit of anger began to loosen. Not because they deserved peace, but because I did. Months passed. Life resumed its rhythm. I moved into a smaller home near the lake, quiet, surrounded by trees. On mornings when the water was still, I'd sit by the window with coffee and watch the reflection of the world ripple softly. Sometimes I thought about my father's letter. About how power bends when it meets truth. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt full, like the space after a long final note in a song. One afternoon, a young woman from the clinic stopped by to drop off case files. She noticed the framed newspaper clipping on my shelf, the one with the headline about the trustee scandal. Was that your case? She asked. I smiled slightly. In a way. Must have taken a lot of courage, she said. It took silence, I replied. The right kind. When she left, I poured another cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was low, golden, reflecting on the lake like glass. The breeze carried the scent of pine and something faintly sweet, like freedom. I thought about everything I'd lost and realized it wasn't really loss. It was cleansing. My family's name was no longer attached to mine. My career wasn't shadowed by guilt. And my heart, though scarred, felt lighter than it had in years. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It waits. Lets time do what anger never could. I sat down, closing my eyes, listening to the soft wind ripple through the trees. Somewhere far away, a bell chimed, one of those clear echoing sounds that hang in the air a little longer than they should. It reminded me that silence isn't emptiness. It's a choice. The same choice I made when I stopped explaining myself. When I let the truth do the speaking. When I decided that revenge wasn't destruction, it was dignity reclaimed. And as the last light of day spilled across the water, I whispered to no one in particular. Silence was never weakness. It was my victory. Sometimes justice doesn't need noise, only patience and proof. If this story touched something in you, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Where are you listening from today? I share stories like this every day, and yours might be the next one that finds its voice.